You're listening to the Assembly Call IU podcast and postgame show, the place where Indiana fans across the globe hang out online after every IU basketball game. Join us for our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and immediately following every IU game at our website, assemblycall.com. That's assemblycall.com. Welcome to this special edition episode of the Assembly Call. I'm really excited to be able to bring you this conversation with Mark Titus, who, if you don't know him, you probably do if you're listening to this podcast, but if you don't know Mark, he was a walk-on at Ohio State. He grew up an Indiana fan, though, and so he has a really unique perspective on Indiana basketball, on Ohio State, so obviously with the game against Ohio State coming up this weekend, I thought it was a perfect time to bring him on, get his thoughts on the Hoosiers, get his thoughts for Archie Miller, who he played for at Ohio State. Archie was an assistant when Mark was a walk-on at Ohio State. And Mark, of course, now the host of the very popular One Shining podcast, which is another college basketball podcast that I highly recommend that you listen to. So really, really appreciative of Mark for taking the time. I think you'll enjoy this conversation, insightful and funny, which is exactly what you would expect from Mark. So that is coming up here in just a second. Before we get to that, though, I do want to just spend a couple of minutes telling you about our sponsor for this episode, and that is our friends at Comfort Option. And you've probably heard me talking about Comfort Option on episodes of Assembly Call Radio over the last several months. And we're really excited to have them as a sponsor. One of the main reasons is because they're Hoosiers just like us. Third generation IU fans, cheered for the Hoosiers, went to Indiana, and they're really proud to serve the Indiana community. And so there's a couple things that they do that are really interesting. One is they have an in-home mattress store to your door service that if you live in Bloomington or Indianapolis, you can schedule a time and they will come out there and custom fit a mattress just for you and, let you try it out and work with you on it and make sure that it's the right fit. And they have a 30-90 satisfaction guarantee on all of it. So if you get it and you're not satisfied with it, they'll come out, redo it, and if it's still not to your liking, they'll refund your money entirely. Now, if you're not in Bloomington or Indianapolis, that is okay because they have an Alpha mattress. And they produce this themselves, and they ship it direct. So that's part of the reason why it costs less than what you might expect, because they can eliminate the middleman. But you can go on their website and customize it to your liking. They will ship it anywhere in the United States, and that same 30-90 satisfaction guarantee still applies. So check out Comfort Option. If you use the promo code ASSEMBLY, you will get $50 off your purchase. Let them know that we sent you here at the Assembly Call. Again, comfortoption.com, promo code ASSEMBLY. At comfortoption.com. All right, now here is our conversation with Mark Titus. Enjoy. All right, I'm very pleased to be joined on this special edition episode of the Assembly Call by Mark Titus, host of One Shining podcast, former walk-on at Ohio State, and a guy who grew up in Indiana, grew up an Indiana fan, so when we started, approaching this Ohio State game, I could think of no one better to come on and talk about it and talk about the Hoosiers than you, Mark. So I appreciate you giving us some time this week.
Yeah, it's great. This is a game that most of the time when Ohio State's playing IU, I feel like I'm gonna come away slightly happy and slightly sad. Like one of my teams is gonna win, the other one's gonna lose. The way both these seasons are going, I don't know. I think even winning is just kind of like, okay, so one of them, their season's not completely over at this point.
Yeah, one of them will get a win.
Yeah. It's been tough. It's been, especially that week. What was it like? I mean, as IU was in the midst of a 7-game losing streak, I think Ohio State's got up to 5. I was losing count, man. But there was a period where I think like the two teams that I've cared about and that I actually still can evoke emotion in me as I'm watching them play. I lost 12 straight combined. And I was like, what is this season of college? Meanwhile, Duke is like an unstoppable machine. I'm like, and Kentucky's good again, and Purdue's winning. It's like, what are we doing here?
I know.
It's good. It's like every rivalry I have is this is unbelievable. So
it is. Well, I want to get into all that. I wanted to start. I know, I've told you this personally, but just, for anybody who hasn't listened to One Shining podcast, I highly recommend that you listen to it. And the thing that I like the most about it, and I just want to give you props for it, is somehow you and Tate are able to clearly show respect and love for the sport of college basketball while balancing it with the showing the absurdity and the comedy of it all, which is kind of a tightrope to walk, and you guys do it really well. So I just wanted to commend you on that because it's really a good show.
Thank you. I think the thing that we learned very quickly, and I don't mean to attack the audience because I'm really attacking myself when I say this, but people don't care about college basketball, and that's weird to me because I care about it. Like, it's all I care about. It's all that matters to me. I think college basketball year round. Things that happen in the real world, I repurpose them as though it's college basketball. That's just all I ever think about. But I found that people care about their team, and that's all they care about. And if you're into college basketball, you care about your team. If you're not into college basketball, you're confused how anyone could like it because you're like, the NBA is better, the players are better, so why would anyone watch worse players? And it's kind of hard to explain to those people. So with the show, we realized, like, instead of breaking down X's and O's and all that kind of stuff, people just want to hear about the absurdities anyway. Those are the shows that people seem to like. We just got done recording an episode. We talked about the Mark Schlabach article that he just wrote, and how the assistant coach was fired for forging the transcripts of Sharif O'Neal. And, like, that stuff is what people really want to hear, is just, like, us making jokes about how corrupt, like, the NCAA basically is, and how – I mean, the NCAA, for God's sakes, like, they just put out something where they are now going to reviewing the end of games. Even like this happened twice this week, where there's a buzzer beater where the shot was clearly, like, still in the guy's hand after the shot was taken. Yeah. But it didn't affect the outcome of the game, but it did affect the spread and the gambling implications. So this happened twice. And in response, like, people were losing their minds. And in response, the NCAA is like, well, we're going to start reviewing those shots. And the only reason you would do it is for gambling purposes. Yet the NCAA is, like, has historically been very anti-gambling. And, like, we don't even want to believe that there's any money involved in any of these sports. So for them to, like, be on the nose about the gambling thing, be so brazen about that, but at the same time, like, try to pretend like it's all about student athletes and school first. It's like, what are we doing here? This is crazy. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying that that's the kind of stuff we enjoy talking about more than anything else, to be honest with you.
It truly is hypocrisy and absurdity at every turn. Yeah. So I'm glad that you guys lean into that. So the other show-related question that I wanted to ask you guys do a segment called Dirty Laundry, which is hilarious, where you read these anonymous stories that people send to you. So which of those stories so far has been about Indiana? Because that's what everybody wants to know.
What is my best story about Indiana?
No, which of those stories was about Indiana?
Which one was about Indiana?
Have you read any on the air that were about Indiana?
Well, I mean, I obviously can't.
I know.
There have been a few. It's mostly – so the problem with this is it's become it's mostly like we were at a party and we saw players getting drunk, and, like, those were funny at first, but it's gotten to a point where it's, like, all sort of the same story. Yeah. And in the same way, like, our podcast, we want to focus on the absurdities. My favorite stories are always the ones that have, like, no substances involved, or that there's no, like, pursuing a woman involved, you know, because that's, like, what all of them seem to be. Is I was at this party, this guy got drunk, then he went home with a woman, and it's like, okay, cool, that sounds like college, man. You know. So my favorite stories are just, like, weird, bizarre. Like, I was a manager and I forgot to do the laundry, and so the jerseys smelled really bad in this game, or, you know, like, something like that. That's just, like, off the beaten path. Those are the ones that I actually find funnier than the ones that people think are gonna be super scandalous at this point. So
yeah, it's a funny segment. So let's transition. Let's talk about the team, and I want to start by talking about Archie, because I think one of the real unique perspectives that you bring to this, in addition to, you know, being an IU fan and an Ohio State fan, is you actually got to play for Archie when you were a walk-on at Ohio State. Archie was a young assistant back then, and we had you on back when he was hired, and you gave us some insight on what that was like. So let's rehash that a little bit, you know, for maybe people who missed that, but just give us your thoughts on, you know, what it was like to play for Archie and how, you know, what you've seen out of him now, you know, his first year and a half as a head coach in the Big Ten.
So Archie was, and this is the story I'll tell everybody for the end of time, because for me, it never gets old. For some others, it might. But he is the only coach I ever had in college who treated me like I was every other player. And looking back, like, I respect the hell out of him for that. That he never once looked down on me and said, that guy's a walk-on. This guy is never going to matter to us in a game. I don't really need to work him out, whatever. He always treated me like I was the national player of the year. And Like I got to get my shots up just like all the other guys. I got to be on time just like all the other guys. He held me accountable. But at the time, it drove me nuts because he came in after I had started the Club Trillion thing, and like my brand was that I don't care anymore. That's what he came in, and he started like it was a culture shock for me for sure because like man, I was not prepared. He had me doing one-on-one. The best story was doing one-on-one full court with Danny Peters, who is currently an assistant coach at Arizona. He's on staff with Sean with Archie's brother. So he made us play one-on-one full court where after every shot you have to now go shoot on the other basket. So like if I'm guarding Dan, or if Danny's guarding me, I go for a layup and miss. I get my offensive rebound. I cannot take it back up. I now have to go dribble to the other side of the court and shoot it. And it doesn't sound like much, but if you like put yourself in that position, we played to like 15 baskets, and oh my god, I was so tired. And I was like, "Why are you doing this to me?" And he just kind of said, "He's like, you never know when your time's going to come, all that kind of stuff." And at the time, I hated that, but now that I've gotten older, I'm like, "Damn, that's kind of awesome that he's like that." He's just like one track mind of like, just I don't know. I don't want to throw around analogies or whatever, but he has a very business like approach to it. And it's very different from the approach that I would have if I was a coach. I would be a loose, fun-loving, just trying to be best friends with all the players, and I would probably be a bad coach because of that. Archie is like just very disciplined, not a yeller. Like I don't remember him like really giving it to us and losing his mind or anything. It was just like you have an expectation. If you're on this team, you're going to earn your spot on this team every single day, and as a 21-year-old, I didn't always love that, but as a 31-year-old looking back, I was like, yeah, that's probably the right call there. That probably makes the most sense.
Yeah. That he's obviously known as a defensive coach and has kind of built his brand and his reputation as a coach with defense and what he did at Dayton, and he certainly tried to instill that at IU. And I think because Indiana's offensives have struggled, especially this year when you have two guys like Juwan and Romeo, people have kind of wondered, like, does this guy know how to coach offense? What kind of be your response to that, and just to how the first couple years have gone at IU so far?
So, yeah, that's a fair. I think defense is definitely his calling card, but I think it's kind of that's true of like every coach. Every coach has one side of the court that they're better at coaching. And when things start to go south, you say he's not good at this other side. I mean, that was the case for John Beilein forever. It was like Michigan is great at offense, but does he know how to coach defense? And then now like people are saying the exact opposite. It's like, wow, John Beilein, he's got this defense working at Michigan, but is their offense good enough? I think that just kind of ebbs. That's like true of almost every team. Is you're better at one thing than you are the other. I don't know. Like for me, like watching IU play. There's a whole host of problems with the team right now that I don't know what the number one thing would be, but at a certain point, like guys just have to make threes. I mean, like I don't know how else to. It's really hard. I mean, like the injury problems have happened. I kind of toe the line back and forth with how much blame Arch deserves, because to me there are a ton of obvious reasons that things have gone poorly. You have injuries, you have suspensions, you have a young team, you have. Like, let's be honest, some of the pieces that have been left over don't necessarily fit with what Arch is trying to do. Scheduling things. I mean, like that stretch of the schedule where they're losing a bunch. I mean, I guess we're still in that stretch, but
unfortunately,
road games like in a row, it's crazy. So there are all these reasons, but what happens is like when you lose one or two in a row, you have a list of reasons. When you start losing 7 in a row, those reasons sound a lot like excuses. And so I understand, like at a certain point, it did sort of look like the guys were giving up. That was considered like the Rutgers game was the one I was like, man, this is tough. This is I don't really know how to defend this one, because they were up. They just kind of, I don't know. They just look lost at a certain point, and that's the kind of stuff that gets frustrating. I think you can pin on the coach, but it's been kind of a season from hell, from the sense of everything you can think that could go wrong has gone wrong. Down to even the guys that are healthy aren't actually healthy. Like Romeo's played in every single game, but he's also got his thumb taped up and can't really shoot with it. And Juwan Morgan's played in every game, but he pops his shoulder out the other night, and it's like I don't know. So that's a cop out way of saying, like, I understand the frustrations that fans have with Archie, but I've always been patient with guys, and I think I have been. Not even just with the guys that I know that I've played for and all that. Like I think like you got to give the guys a little bit of time to get everything set. And I just think that getting Romeo was almost a curse in a way because just all the hype around him. It felt like he was going to be the savior that could step in and basically be what like Zion Williamson is for Duke, where it's like just larger than life. I carry the team. It doesn't matter if anyone else is playing well. I will find a way to win this game for us. And that's just not a fair expectation to have on any kid, much less a freshman. So I feel like that kind of didn't help things either. Is that a lot of IU fans, myself included, were like kind of we fell into that trap of thinking it doesn't matter the other four that you throw out there with Romeo because we have Romeo and they don't, and that's all we need. Which, as it turns out, you might need a little more.
Yeah. And the losing has been frustrating. I think what's really frustrated IU fans, and you alluded to it when you were talking about the Rutgers game, is at times it has just felt like there isn't any fight, there isn't any toughness. Not that they've given up, but that they just don't really have the confidence, that they're going to be able to get through this stretch, and it'll go from a 10-point stretch to a 22-0 run. And really, probably the two worst games in that were the Michigan game and the Nebraska game at home. For some reason, this team has really struggled at home. When you see a team that's struggling with that, like with focus or effort or confidence or toughness, like whatever you want to say about it, what accounts for that? Like, is that just something about the individual guys? Is that something about what the coach is emphasizing? Like, what contributes to that?
See, it's so hard. It's again, this is a cop out, but it is just like a case by case thing, man. Because it is guys like I just saw that playing at Ohio State. You're playing along some guys who just have that fire, and they lose a game. They're going to be like that night after you lose. They're going to be in the gym for another hour putting up shots. Like they missed this one shot at this pivotal moment of the game. And so they just sit there all night and they're just shooting the shot over and over. And it's like there are guys that are wired that way and there are other guys that aren't. And it's easy to kind of pin it on the coach and be like, why is the coach not giving these guys the pep talk that they need? And why is he not preaching how important playing for something bigger than yourself is? And that might be the case too. Like, I mean, I'm not saying Arch is not to blame. It's just from my experience, players are wired so differently that that there are a lot of guys like I was wired the other way. Like I built my brand on it. Literally, I got the freaking frame shirt about Club Trill, like about how I was more passive, and I just told the story like Arch would want me to get up shots, and I was like, nah, I'm good. I don't really need all that. I'm just kind of here to get a degree and have some fun and graduate, move on to whatever is next in life. So it does fall on the player. I mean, it is sort of a lead a horse to water situation with some of this stuff, but yeah, I think as a collective, I think it is fair to sort of pin a collective thing on a coach. I think like one or two guys don't really have a fire. I mean, Thad Matta, the guy that I played for that I love dearly and still talk to all the time, he kind of ran into these issues at the end of his tenure at Ohio State. That was the big complaint, was that fans would say we're fine with losing. It's just how we're losing. It's there's no fire from these guys. And they kind of pinned it on Thad. And I mean, I talk to Coach about it all the time. And he's like, I'm doing the same things I did when John Diebler and Dave Leidy and Evan Turner would be in the gym all day, every day, working on their games. Like I said the same thing to those guys that I'm saying to these guys. And for some reason, the Leidys and the Turners and the Dieblers took it to heart and were in there working on their game. And these other guys didn't care as much.
So is that just a recruiting thing then?
Yeah, it might be. It might just be like kind of sensing the personalities of the guys that you're that might be something you gotta pinpoint in recruiting and suss that out. And yeah, I think there's more to it than just saying like I think when you're a fan you think why can't the coach just yell at them more, and especially IU fans, especially with the Knight persona just lingering always around the Indiana basketball program, is like Bobby would just yell at them and then they would play harder, and why can't the coach do that now? And to that I say it's a little more complicated than that, but I do understand the sentiment because I feel the same way. It's when the whole collective team is not. It feels like they don't care and they're only playing for themselves. That is very frustrating. I do get that part.
How much hope do you have for this Indiana team to be able to make something of the rest of the season?
I mean, that's always hard to define, right? I mean, that's like the problem with Indiana basketball in general is like, what does success look like for Indiana on any given season, right?
I think for this year, making the NCAA tournament coming in, snapping a 2-year drought would have been seen as a success by pretty much everybody. And now, that seems to be slipping away.
I think making the tournament would be good. Honestly, it is. I think just having that feeling that they do care is a big thing. But yeah, I think they could. I'm confident they're going to make the tournament. I think there's too much talent. They're starting to come around. I mean, I don't think it is just a scapegoat to point to the injuries and the suspensions and all that stuff. I mean, you look at the way the team was the roster that they had available up until like the Michigan State game. I mean, without Devontae Green, who I know is can be a headache at times with the way he plays, but the guy can shoot at least and can help with 3-point shooting as he did at Michigan State. And then getting Deron Davis back, that was much needed to have like a post presence because that was. I mean, Jawan can go down there, but you don't want him living down there. You want him kind of popping around. You want him to post up and then be versatile and stuff. So to have, like for me watching that Michigan State game, it kind of everything was falling into line. It's like this is what this team can look like if you have a post presence. You can draw a double team, kick it out to some guys who can actually hit open threes, and you move the ball a little bit. And Romeo's got his mojo going. He doesn't feel like he's got to do too much. I think that I still believe that you can pull that together and. Yeah, and another reason that I haven't even touched on, like the Big Ten is legitimately a great conference from top to bottom. And I think like the days of being completely humiliated, losing to Rutgers, it's still humiliating to see Rutgers score more points than you. But you talk to people around the Big Ten, I mean, they all say the same thing. Like Rutgers is not. I mean, this was something I was pretty like when Ohio State Thad's last game, he lost to Rutgers in the Big Ten tournament. And that was like the final straw for Ohio State fans. And I remember thinking, like, man, Rutgers is not as bad as people think. But at the same time, you can't really say that out loud because, like, as soon as those words exit your mouth, they're like, come on, dude, really? So, yeah, the Big Ten is very good. That doesn't help things. But I think that it does help with the resume in the sense that, having a 4-8 Big Ten record is not necessarily a complete humiliation for this team. I mean, for Indiana, obviously, we're shooting for higher things moving forward. But as of right now, I still think they can make the tournament. That's a realistic expectation. I think would be, all things considered, not a bad thing for this team. Like as you close the chapter, it'd be bad for the Romeo era if he goes pro, and this is all we saw of him was just a first round exit. Like you lose him in Dayton in the play-in game. That kind of sucks to look back on the Romeo career, but for what this team has been through, I think just making the tournament would be a good step in the right direction with the recruiting class they have coming in next year and all that. You can build and the way you go.
You talked about Romeo and some of the expectations on him maybe being a little bit unfair. What have you seen from him? Like, has he been what you thought, been better, been worse than what you thought? How do you kind of assess his season so far?
He's been not quite as so I didn't really follow him a lot in high school. I just heard things, which is honestly the better way to do it, I think. Like recruiting's more fun to follow that way when you just like hear that. I mean, it's so funny to hear my favorite story of recruiting is like Jabari Parker was the greatest recruit since LeBron. That's all I heard was like, dude got Jabari Parker, and this guy is LeBron 2.0, and this is going to be awesome. And then Andrew Wiggins announces that he's reclassifying, and everyone's like, okay, so Jabari Parker is the second best recruit now. Andrew Wiggins is the best. I was like, well, wait, isn't that the guy that's LeBron? It's so much more fun to just have no idea about these guys. So I didn't really follow Romeo that closely, but I heard a lot of stuff, and he's definitely more passive than I thought, but he's still producing. And so it has been strange because I think it's easy to pin it on him, like some of the problems with the team, because he does have sort of a relaxed attitude with things and goes through the most, can throw some lazy passes, can make some just kind of lazy plays here and there. So you pin that along with like all the expectations and this idea that he was a savior. And you put that together, you look at the record, and you're like, well, it's got to be this guy's fault. But I think he's playing. I've enjoyed watching him play. I think he's fun to watch. I think he's very, very smooth. I would love to see him come back, and not even because I'm an IU fan. I think that like he could greatly benefit if his ultimate goal to be like a great NBA player and hit the ground running when he gets to the NBA. I think like coming back, playing with that great recruiting class, working on his jump shot. I know he's got the thumb thing, but maybe he's not that great of a shooter anyway. Whatever. We get all that sorted out. You get your jumper straight. You're on a good team. You're a sophomore now. Kind of do like a Miles Bridges thing. I know it didn't work out great for Michigan State when Miles Bridges came back, but it worked out great for his NBA career because then this year he's killing it as a rookie. I think that would be awesome. But I like Romeo a lot. I really do. I just think the expectations were kind of irrational, and they always were. He was. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It felt like this guy was the biggest recruit, like maybe of all time in Indiana, just in terms of the hype. Not that he was the best, but it just felt like the way he drug out his commitment, and it just kind of, you had the Archie coming in, so it was like this new era. but also Romeo's a 5-star, and we don't know where he's going to go. We really, really need this guy. We really need him. And just the way my dad still goes to all these high school games, and he'd tell me just like all the people going nuts for Romeo, and the lines out the door waiting to go see him play so they can hold up their candy striped pants and like, please come to IU.
Yeah.
All that stuff, it felt like I was like, damn, dude, I was there when Eric Gordon was playing, and I was in Indianapolis when Eric Gordon and Josh McRoberts and Mike Conley and Greg Oden, like I played with all these guys. I don't think they ever got like that. I mean, it was bad, but like it wasn't like that. That's crazy. So
I mean, it's basically Damon and Romeo. You know,
yeah,
I mean, that's when you're mentioned in the same sentence as Damon Bailey, and obviously it's two different eras, but it's pretty rarefied air when it comes to high school basketball in Indiana.
Yeah. But no, I do like Romeo a lot though. He's been good. He's been about like overall talent. He's been what I expected. I think like the way he's going about producing is not what I expected. But that's more on me because I was just ignorant to the whole thing. I was just like reading articles and buying into the hype because it's more fun that way. It really is. It's more fun to watch his announcement and just like I don't know. I actually watched. I think that's the only. I wouldn't say the only. Maybe it's like one of 5 high school commitment press conferences I've ever watched live in my life was Romeo, and he picked IU, and I was just like losing my mind. I was calling my dad, my brother, and all that kind of stuff. They're like, "How good is he?" I was like, "I don't really know, but they're saying he's great. They're saying he's going to be the savior. This is awesome."
Yeah. You know, one of the things that people have wondered about Archie as he transitions from Dayton now up to coaching in the Big Ten and just kind of his style is how he'll be able to coach elite talent. Do you think he'll have an issue with that at all? And have you seen anything with how he's handled Romeo, at least publicly, that would make you say, like, I wonder.
Yeah. I think the elite talent thing is just managing personalities more than anything. I don't think I mean, the idea that a player could be too good for a coach to know what to do with, I don't think that's going to be a problem. It's more of how do you manage the ego of, and I'm not saying Romeo has a massive head, but at a certain point when you're 18 years old and you've been billed as a savior and everywhere you go, people are having you sign their babies and all that kind of stuff. Like it's kind of hard not to think that you're above everybody and all that. So I think that's the issue is just managing egos. And I mean, I can't really speak to that. Like, I don't like what you don't really know how that looks until it happens. And each guy is different. I mean, I'm really close with Greg Oden and he was the most humble, modest, 5-star recruit maybe that's ever lived. Like that guy was just never ever once thought he was good at basketball. It was the weirdest thing. Like you had to convince him that he was better. Like, Greg, you understand. I remember when Greg was he was entering his freshman year of high school, and I asked him whether he thought he was, or I said something about like, do you know your schedule yet, or something. Like I was trying to figure out a way I could watch him play. And he said, I remember, I'll never forget this. He's 7 foot tall, about to be a freshman in high school at Lawrence North, and he said, "Oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to be on the JV or the varsity team yet." And I was like, "Greg, you're going to be on the varsity. Like, Greg, you realize like you're like in 8th grade. You could go pro right now and probably be a lottery pick. Like, you're probably going to be on the varsity team, buddy." And I say that just to like that's how Greg was wired. And I think so when I hear stuff about like the elite talent, it's not so much how can you squeeze every ounce of potential out of this player on the court. For me, it's more of like how do you deal with this era of a new player where it makes me sound like an old man, but these are real concerns of like the social media stuff. Like these kids are becoming stars a lot faster than let's be frank, like some of them deserve, if we're being honest. Like some of these guys are not Romeo, but like a lot of recruits they have a sweet mixtape and now all of a sudden they have 400,000 Instagram followers and they're actually like a 3-star recruit that's not that great at basketball. So I think like that's the real challenge is like how do you manage the egos? And to that, that's just something you're gonna have to wait and see whether Archie can figure that out or not.
How's Greg doing, by the way? Is he still a manager at Ohio State?
Yeah, he's helping out with the team, which he's graduating in the spring. He lives in Dublin, Ohio, which is just a suburb here in Columbus. He's taking classes, graduating. He's married. He's got a little baby girl.
Oh wow!
He's figured it out. He's finally like got everything figured out, and I'm really happy for him.
Good for him.
Yeah, he's very, very successful in his life, and I think people are shocked to hear that because his basketball career was not what he had planned. But
And he was, and he was public with some of the struggles that he's had. So that's awesome to hear.
Yeah. He's definitely figured it out. Although he did tell me for the Super Bowl, a buddy of mine and we smoked some brisket, we made some pulled pork and some ribs, and we did like this big blowout barbecue and invited Greg over, and he said he's not coming because he's a vegan now. Oh. So I'm a little worried about that. I'm a little bit worried about that. That caught me off guard. I was like, Greg, are you all right? Do we need to talk, buddy?
Getting back to the current team, what other players on the current team that project to be there next year? So, not Juwan, not Romeo, are you the most excited about?
I think obviously Rob Finnis is the guy for me. Like that is, I really do think. I mean, a freshman point. I think he's kind of. I don't know. I got to choose my words carefully. I don't want to say that he's underappreciated, but it's so hard to be a freshman point guard in college basketball at any level of college basketball, much less like high major, much less at a place like IU. And I think he's been great. I've really liked what I've seen from him, and I think he feels like a guy that's a 4-year guy, and that's also very exciting to think that like he's going to be the starting point guard for the next 3 years, and it also helps he's from Lafayette. That's always a nice little plus. That
yes,
my best Lafayette recruit of all time. So yeah, I think he's got to be the guy for me. That's the one that I'm most excited about, and he also adds like this whole idea of Arch. Like when Arch got hired, I remember his press conference just talking about how important it was to recruit the state of Indiana. And obviously everyone at the time thought that was Romeo who he was talking about. But getting a guy like Rob Finney and getting that recruiting class they have next year, like these are the guys that are actually – I think you want to build with guys like Rob Finney, and then you want to sprinkle in the Romeo Langfords every so often and then hope that the stars align and you make a push when that happens. I think that's the formula for winning this is like, don't load up on all 5-star guys. Don't load up on, or don't try to do it don't handcuff yourself by only doing like a John Beeline move where you like take pride in only getting 2-star guys. Don't do that either. I think like you want to find these guys like Rob Finney, make that your foundation, the Yogi Ferrells of the world, and then every so often get a Cody Zeller and a Romeo Langford and guys like that, and have them pop in and hope that 1 or 2 years you have them, you can put it all together.
Do you think all the talk about needing to close down the borders and focus on in-state, is that overblown, or is that as important as it is made to be?
Well, perception's reality, right? So like if it's important to all the fans, I guess it's important. I think like obviously there are talented players that come from anywhere. I think like part of what Indiana basketball stands for, and IU is certainly the last 20 years of IU has been an identity crisis more than anything, and it's just people young and old, and what do they want to? You want to be old school like Bob Knight, but everyone also thinks Knight was kind of a dick. So it's like, how do we take the Knight principles but not the Knight attitude? But then we also want to be new age, because like it's kind of upsetting how Kentucky is like the team that everyone talks about, even though they've won one national title. Like, how can IU get to that? So there's like sort of this identity crisis going on. But the one thing that seems consistent from like everybody is that just having pride in the name on the front of the jersey. And I think like growing up in Indiana, that is something that is just instilled in you. Is not necessarily playing for IU. Obviously, I did not go to IU, but I still have an immense pride for being from the state of Indiana as a basketball player. That is something that I will always have pride in. I heard last night I was watching Ohio State playing Penn State, and Robbie Hummel was on the call, and he was talking about that. He said playing in the Big Ten he was doing his nerdy Robbie Hummel, as he typically is, just droning on and on. It's like, we get it, Robbie, calm down, buddy. But at one point he's talking about playing in the Big Ten. He's like, I don't care where you grew up playing high school basketball, whether it was here or there, whether you even were playing in Indiana, which is really hard to play. Like, he kind of made some comment about like how Indiana basketball is a big deal. So I think that part of it is important. Like, you want guys who understand this idea that there is sort of a mythos to Indiana basketball, and it's real, because again, perception is reality. And if every single person in Assembly Hall believes that the concept of Indiana basketball is elevated above the rest of the country, then you want guys that are buying into that same concept. You want a synergy between everyone in the program, the coach, the players, the fans, all of that. I think that's reasonable to expect. So I don't necessarily like a great counter to that would be like a guy like Victor Oladipo, who is obviously not from Indiana, but he got it. You know, like he got there, he understood it all. He still gets it being on the Pacers. That to me is more important than like the geography of where the guy is from. You just want someone who understands the magnitude of it all.
Al Durham's like that, you know, a guy from Georgia, but, you know, hard worker, kind of embodies all of the principles that you want. So you want to get the best players because there's a lot of talent that comes out of the state, and then find guys out of state that are talented but still fit that culture, which, you know, you're right about the identity crisis, and Indiana's going to have to solve that. By the way, why did you end up going to Ohio State, not to Indiana? I don't know that I know that story. Was that because of the relationship with Mike and Greg?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. So, first of all, so Mike Davis was the coach at IU at the time, and the reason, so Mike and Greg both wanted to go to IU. Initially, and I've told this story. I think I've told it on the podcast, but I don't remember. I know I've told it publicly, so I'm not necessarily breaking news here, but a lot of people will be hearing this for the first time. So when Mike Davis was recruiting Mike Conley, he got him confused with Sharon Collins, and he would send mail from Mike Davis. Mike Conley would get mail from Indiana basketball. It would say, "Dear Sharon, saw that you dropped 40 last night. Good for you. Like, we would love to have you in Bloomington. Let's stay in touch. Signed, Mike Davis." And he would get these letters made out to Sharon Collins. And so Mike's dad, calls Davis and is like, "Hey, just FYI, you're sending us Sharon Collins mail." It's probably like a clerical error because Conley Collins, you know, probably like right there on the side, whatever. He's like, "Just FYI, you're sending us the wrong mail." So a week goes by, and the exact same thing kept happening. And then at that point, Mike Sr. like stepped in and was like, "You can't go to IU. Like, I can't let you play for this guy. If this guy can't even send a letter to the right person, like, I'm not gonna, you know." And so Greg did get the right mail. This is my understanding. Again, you'd have to ask these guys themselves, but this is what's been relayed to me. I believe Greg got the right mail. Greg really had a great relationship with Mike Davis, liked him a lot. But Mike Sr. kind of stepped in and was like, "Greg, no, I can't let you, like, in good faith, go play for this guy either." And that's kind of the story that I've been told. And then meanwhile, Thad was recruiting him. Thad was a little younger and full of energy and a lot of fun. It was before Thad had his foot issues and his back issues and all that. Yeah. So Thad was like a kind of guy that was just like, you go to these practices and Thad's diving all over loose balls as a player's coach, all that kind of stuff. And they fell in love with Coach Matta and they chose Ohio State. And anyway, I wanted to go to a big school, and they just kind of Greg convinced me just to come to Ohio State with him. He's like, "Why don't you just come hang out with me, be my roommate for 3 years, 4 years, whatever it was he told me he was going to do." And I was like, "I don't think it's going to be that long." So that was pretty much it. It's like I didn't necessarily want to play basketball in college. I didn't like it enough to play it. Like I was getting recruited by like Indiana State and UNC Wilmington and places like that. And you know, people that choose that path, I don't think I'm better than them as a person or anything like that. It's just for me personally, like I didn't love basketball enough to play at that level. I was like, if I could figure out a way to play at a high major level, I'll do it. But I don't like it enough to play at Indiana State. So I was just going to Ohio State to just be a normal student. And then I said the right things, and Coach Matta liked me, and here I am now.
You mentioned how Coach Matta is like a player's coach. And, you know, one of the things Archie talked about when he was hired was how one of the biggest lessons he learned as a coach was from Thad Matta about the importance of building relationships and getting to know guys personally. Yeah. What makes a coach a player's coach? Because typically when you hear that, it kind of brings all this baggage along with it, like you put up with stuff and you're permissive and, right. You know, maybe you don't have that strong of a system and you allow players to freestyle, yada, yada. Like, what do you mean when you say player's coach?
I think for me, it's understanding that every player is different and has different goals and being in tune with those goals and just kind of knowing that your role as a coach, as much as the boosters might argue otherwise, your goal as a coach, your number one responsibility, this is how I believe. And I'm sure it's certainly how Coach Matta believes, and the way Arch talks seems to be the way he believes too. Your number one responsibility is not to win basketball games. Your number one responsibility is not to appease the boosters, to appease your athletic director, anything like that. Your number one responsibility is always to your players and getting the most out of them that you can, helping them achieve their goals, both on the court and in life. As corny as that sounds, like a lot of guys do. I mean, I honest to God, like I come from a great background. I love my dad to death. He's a great dad. did everything right. I still think of like Coach Matta as a father figure. It's not like I had a hole in my life as a father figure and then I filled it in with Coach Matta. It's just like that's the role a coach plays for players when you have a good relationship like that. So I still think of Coach Matta that way. And that for me is like what a player's coach is just someone who understands that win or lose, like I'm here for you guys and just kind of embodies that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Do you think he'll coach again, Coach Matta?
I'm gonna get in trouble, man. I can't speculate on that. I speculated it on our podcast, so I said. I mean, I'm gonna preface it by saying this is speculation. I have not talked to him about it. In fact, when I try to talk to him about it, he just like raises his glass of beer and he's like, "I'm loving life, man." That's all he said. He does not want to talk to me about it. My sense is just me. Again, I need to preface it again because I did get in trouble for something I said on the podcast. I think the Butler job, should it open up, might have his attention, maybe. Because he lives right by campus. He loves Butler. He went to Butler. He played at Butler. The idea of him like coaching at Butler would be a cool story. It feels like a perfect level for him. They're obviously in the Big East, and it's not. I don't mean to degrade Butler, but it's not quite to say you don't have the same expectations at Butler that you would at Ohio State. So that's where I think I'm just trying to will that into existence because I think that would be a cool.
It'd be a great story.
Maybe that's just like what I want, but I know that he's still really tight with like Barry Collier. He still goes to all the Butler games. But I made these comments on my own podcast, and apparently people took that as me saying that Thad was like scheming behind the scenes to get the Butler job. And so he calls me. He's like, "What the hell did you say?" And I was like, "What?"
Well, I'm just gonna edit out all of your prefacing, so it just comes out as you.
Right. That is, or just take the part where I said Thad was scheming behind the scenes. Yeah. That's not happening at all. He's not mentioned me even one iota that he's interested in that. But that's just the sense I get when I'm around him. You know, his wife went to Butler. His daughter goes to Butler. I think his other daughter is a senior at Buff in Indianapolis. I think she might be going to Butler. So they got a lot of Butler ties, and they live by Butler. Just it makes a lot of sense.
It does.
That would be really cool. But I don't want to speak about LaVall Jordan's job. You know, let him figure that out as he wants. But should that open up in the next 5 years or so, that would be cool. But otherwise, he's in no hurry to get back to it, certainly.
So turning our attention to Sunday, we mentioned it earlier, big game for both IU and Ohio State, as both teams try to get out of the bottom half of the conference and, see if they can work their way into the top half. What do you think are going to be the keys to this game?
Oh, man. For Ohio State, Caleb Weston has to stay out of foul trouble. This is a problem that he's had all year. He's like
sounds familiar.
Yeah, no kidding. So for me, like the struggles with Ohio State and IU, it feels similar because it's coaches in their second years trying to kind of build their own thing. They're both kind of having years that aren't going as great as they expected. For Ohio State, I really feel like it's a talent problem. And that's almost a tougher pill to swallow because when I watch IU, I'm like, man, these guys can pull it together. There is a world in which like they start hitting shots and they get a post presence and
it was in East Lansing. It was beautiful.
Yeah, right. It was beautiful. Right. You're like, you watch that game and you're like, man, they could do this like every night, couldn't they? I think they could. And you start talking to Ohio State, man, we just don't have that much talent. And it pains me to say because I do love the guys on the team. They're all great guys to root for. I do think they play hard. I think they give it their all. It's just I feel like Caleb Weston is the one. If you did like a draft, if you did an expansion draft around with the college basketball or whatever, and teams could draft Ohio State's players to add to their team for the rest of the season, Caleb Weston's the only guy that anyone's looking at. And we have some good. I like Dwayne Washington. He's a good freshman. I love Luther Muhammad. He's going to be great eventually. But just right now, I think we're struggling talent wise, and that is the problem. So when Caleb Weston, when your best player, like the one guy you can lean on, is always in foul trouble, is not necessarily in the greatest shape to begin with, and kind of plays an old school brand of basketball, that is not a great recipe for success. And I think that explains like Ohio State struggles more than anything. A lot of people been texting me when we lost 5 in a row, like, what's going on with this team? I was like, I think we're just regressing to the mean, to be honest with you. I think, like, we kind of had some fool's gold in the non-conference schedule where we beat Cincinnati, who I still don't think Cincinnati's that good. Cincinnati's got hot. They're ranked now and all that, but I don't think Cincinnati's that good. we won at Creighton, which at the time felt like a massive win, and it's like that's all right, So we got like pushed up to what were we ranked, like 15, something like that, which was always kind of preposterous. So our only hope and I say this is the one time I say R in reference to the team Indiana is playing. Our only hope in Ohio State is that Caleb Weston stays out of foul trouble, which unfortunately has not been happening a lot lately. So.
When I was growing up, Indiana-Ohio State was one of the best rivalries. That was back in the days of Calbert Cheaney and Jim Jackson. It was such a great rivalry, and it just hasn't been the same in a while. Do you, without necessarily needing to compare the two, do you have a lot of faith in Archie and Chris Holtmann that they're both good fits where they are, and that, maybe as, the older coaches in the Big Ten, like Izzo and Beeline, either start to fade or eventually go away, that Indiana and Ohio State will be positioned to get back to kind of where they were when we were growing up?
I mean, I'm going to say yes either way, but I genuinely do believe that because I think it is a cultural thing that you want a coach who understands the culture of the place is at, and I do really believe that Arch understands that. And at a certain point, that doesn't win you games. The idea that Archie Miller values in-state recruits more than Tom Crean did doesn't mean that he's going to win more. But I do think he's a better cultural fit. I think he fits well with it's hard to hear that right now with IU losing a lot, but I do believe that Archie's great for IU. And the same is true of Coach Holtmann, man. Like Holt was so smart in taking over for Dad when he stepped in. Like he knew that the problem wasn't culture at Ohio State. He knew that the reason Thad Matta was fired had nothing to do with the program that he had built. So a lot of guys will step in and try to gut what they're taking over and put their own stamp on things. And Coach Holtmann from the start was like very cognizant of what Thad Matta had built. And he's like the first to tell you that Thad shouldn't have been fired. He's like, I think Thad got a raw deal. I shouldn't even be here. Like he told me that every time I talk to him. He's like, I shouldn't be here, but I am. So I'm going to do the best job I can. And I hope you support me. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I kind of feel the same way, Coach. Like, I don't think Thad should have been fired, but since you're here, let's do it. Let's win some games. So he kept like everything in place. He kept some of the director of ops. Like it doesn't seem like much, but that stuff goes a long way. Like the same director of ops that Thad had, the same secretary at the basketball offices is still there, the same training staff, the same he brought in his own coaches, did some other stuff like that, but he kept like the bones of the culture of Ohio State basketball the same. And I thought that was very smart because a lot of guys want to come in and kind of say out with the old, in with the new. And so with that, I think it is just kind of a natural extension of what Thad built that Ohio State's on the right path as well. Especially we have a pretty good recruiting class too. I think Ohio State next year is going to be awesome. Just you're just gonna have to wait a year though.
yeah. Hopefully this game on Sunday is.
When I come on the show next year, we're gonna have a lot more fun. I'll put it that way.
Yes.
Hopefully a much better game than what this is gonna be.
Yes. So speaking of fun, you guys went to go on a podcast tour, which is awesome, and I would love to do sometime. And one of your stops was in Bloomington. What was the experience like? Kind of just being in Bloomington and getting to hang out with IU fans.
So I got to tell the story. I think that Dockage. This is So so first of all, to answer your question, it was a ton of fun. Like it was awesome. Anytime I always say that IU is the college that I went to high school at. My brother went to IU, older than me. When I was growing up in high school, I went to Bloomington all the time. It's all, anytime I go to Bloomington, it really does feel like a homecoming for me, even though I didn't go to Indiana for college. So going back there was awesome. I got to take Tate to Knicks. We played Sink the Biz. He was like, "What are we doing?" He's like, "Doesn't everybody get strep throat playing this game?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's part of the charm. Just stick your hand in there and chug the beer, man." That's
Tate is your co-host on One Shining Podcast.
I took them there. We went to, where else did we go? We went to Kilroy's and we got pepperoni sticks and they love that. So I tried to show them like the local flavor of all that.
Yeah,
it was a good time. But I have to tell the Dockage story. I think that Dockage was. I reached out to Dan to be our guest for the live show. He said he would do it. I know Dan a little bit. I know Andrew's on staff at Ohio State. I had nothing but love. I guess I should make it past tense. I had nothing but love for Dan for the longest time. Like I felt like I was like the one guy who's younger than 40 that actually loved Dan Dockage. So I asked him to come on, and like I could have asked. I mean, I could have asked Arch, to be honest. I could have had the head coach of Indiana come, and I wanted Dockich because I thought it'd be fun, and I thought we could make him likable in a weird way. Like I have a big enough ego to think that like I could take a guy like him, have him come on our show. We kind of bust each other's balls. People that are at the show are like, "Oh, I hated Dockich, but actually he seemed kind of fun there." So and maybe he could win some fans over. The night before, we were doing a show in Louisville, and we get done with the show. We're going out in Louisville with some of the people we know that were with us at the show, and just out having drinks, whatever. At like 11:45, I get a text from Dockich. It says, "Apologies." This is word for word what it said. "Apologies, but I must cancel." And this is 11:45 p.m. the night before the show in Bloomington. So I'm like, what? And I said something like, he didn't give me a reason, didn't mention anything, didn't give me no reason. "Apologies, but I must cancel." And I was like, at 11:45 on a Saturday, you're texting me. Okay. But I just wrote back. I was like, "No worries, man. Would have been a fun time, but I get it. That's how these things work sometimes." So we go out and do. I started thinking like, man, something must have happened. Like maybe I had a family emergency. I reached out to Andrew. I was like, "Hey, what's going on with your family? Like, is your dad all right? I just want to make sure everything's cool." Don't hear anything back. So I thought something serious had happened. And then the next day, the day of our show in Bloomington, I'm on Twitter, and Dockich is just like getting in fights with people on Twitter about Brett Kavanaugh. He's just tweeting like one after another. He's like taking articles of like, and he's putting his little commentary. And he's like, "I don't know. This is pretty interesting what Brett Kavanaugh said here." Like whatever it was, it doesn't matter. But he's just tweeting on and on about Brett Kavanaugh. It's like, huh. I wonder what's going on. Like, what? I didn't really say it. So we go to the show that night, and we had billed the show as Dockich was coming. We had promoted it. We had said Dan Dockich is going to be our special guest. So we introduced Dockich. He does not come out, obviously, because he wasn't there. The crowd's looking around confused, and then we flash his text to me on the screen behind us, and everyone like just starts laughing. And then I tell them the story, and then I said, by a round of applause, how many people in here are okay with Dan Dockich not being at the show tonight? And it was the loudest cheer we got on the entire tour. The place erupted. So we ended up doing the show by ourselves, which it was fine. We made Bob Knight jokes all night, just talked about IU. It was a really fun time, but it worked out well. And then apparently people in the audience were tweeting at Dockich as we were doing the show, and my phone starts blowing up. Like I'm on stage, like talking to the microphone. I'm looking at my phone. It's like Dockich is texting me and tweeting at me and all that stuff. And then he said that his reasoning was that so when he gets called out for like ditching us on the show, he said his reasoning was that he had a death that he had to tend to. And so I don't know what's worse, like lying that someone died close to you that you had to tend to their death or whatever, and you chose to lie about that to get yourself out of this bad situation that makes you look bad. Or maybe that is true. Maybe he really did have a death that he had to tend to. But it might be worse that, like, as he was tending to this death, he tweeted like 47 times about Brett Kavanaugh with strangers on the internet. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know which one's worse, the lie or the truth. Like, I don't know how he comes up. But that's pretty much the story. It was that was our Indiana experience. And needless to say, Dockich and I have not talked since. And I'm sure he's okay with that. And I'm sure he'll listen to this podcast. He will tweet about me and make himself a victim. And all of that.
He's made it quite clear he doesn't listen to this podcast. So.
Yeah, Dan, listen, someone's going to tweet this at you. I heard what Titus – did you hear what Titus said about you? I liked you, Dan. I always did. I thought we had something. You screwed me. You screwed me, man. That's all I would really say to him. See, the biggest – it was a huge show for us. It was a big deal for us. I could have asked – there's so many former IU players I could have asked to still live in Bloomington. There's so many – I could have asked the coaches. I could have asked Thad Matta to come down from Indy. And I chose you, Dan. You were the one. I've wanted you at the show, and you did that to me. So, but I do pray for the death you had to tend to. That sounds tough. Hope thoughts and prayers for that. The mysterious death that you never brought it up again after that. You never mentioned who this person was in your life that passed away. And you were tweeting about Brett Kavanaugh. So it sounds like it was really, really close to you. And I'm sorry to hear that.
On that trip, so Tate, your co-host, he's a North Carolina guy, big North Carolina fan. Was that his first time to Bloomington? And what was kind of the thing about Bloomington, for someone who hasn't been there that stood out to him?
He's got sour grapes. One about 81. He wasn't even alive. I mean, for God's sakes, I wasn't even alive. But he's got sour grapes about 81 because his parents talk to him about it all the time. And 84 for the Dockich. He was like, he actually doesn't like Dockich, I don't think, because he grows up a Carolina fan. Every time he watches Dan Dockich on a broadcast, it's like talking about shutting down Jordan. He's growing up listening to that, getting upset.
Yeah.
So he always had like an aversion to IU for that. But he also remembered that Bob Knight, like very early on, said Michael Jordan is like the greatest player he's ever seen. Like the Olympics in 84?
84, yeah.
When he was coaching Jordan in 84, Knight said something in a press conference. So Tate remembers all this. Like Tate, no one holds a grudge like Tate does. He keeps his tallies of like who's saying good things about Carolina and who's not. So he loved it though, man. He really liked Assembly Hall. I kind of hyped it up to him as best I could. The Dean Dome is not as good of an arena as it should be. So I think we got to walk around Assembly Hall a little bit. He loved that. We didn't pick a great time to come to campus. I told him to come back in the spring. That's really the time to be there. But we were there in November, but it wasn't too bad. But yeah, he really enjoyed it, and we actually drove on the tour. So he flew into Columbus, and then we drove from Columbus to Louisville, to Bloomington, and then up to Chicago. And we got through going from Louisville to Bloomington. We got a lot of barnyard baskets on the barns and baskets in the driveway and all that kind of stuff. And there was one that I made him pull over and take a picture because we were driving and I was like, dude, pull over. I gotta get a picture of that and send it to my mom. She'll love that. It was just it looked like a scene out of Hoosiers. It was just like on a barn, a basket affixed to a barn, and it looked like it was put up there in 1946. And he loved all that. So he very much buys into the mystique of Indiana basketball for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. One thing, you have a unique perspective in that, you built an audience as a blogger, but yet at the same time you were kind of inside a program. Not playing a ton, obviously, but inside a program, seeing the inner workings of a program. And, one of the big things that's changed about sports coverage, especially college basketball coverage, is the ability for people, to start a blog and build an audience and, be able to have some kind of influence with that audience. Like, us starting this show 8 years ago. We played in high school, but never actually played in college. I'm curious from your perspective, when you see, people like us or others who are, bloggers that haven't necessarily played, and you have the perspective of having played, like, do you kind of discount those opinions? Are you initially skeptical, or how do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, I toe the line, man. If I'm around bloggers that never played, I get a flex the I played card, and then when I'm around guys that played, it's like, well, I'm smarter than you because I'm in journalism now. Just any way I could be superior to the people I'm talking to is how I handle it. No, man, I think for college basketball, for me, it's like I first of all, like, I don't think I'm that much more qualified than anyone else. Like it is true that I was on a Final Four team. People forget that. They should talk about it more. I'm not sure why they don't, but I was, I got to see the inner workings of how this stuff works. I got to see. I have some sort of experience, but it's not like I'm that much of a better player than anybody. It's not like, it's not like it's not like people should come to me and ask me what it's like to be Zion Williamson and have all this pressure on you to be the number. It's like, I don't know, dude. Like, what? Just because I wore a jersey on the end of a bench for 4 years, like, I don't know what that's like.
Maybe the better way to ask my question would have been, what do people like us miss the most, do you think? Like, what do we not know or not understand enough?
I think kind of what we were talking about earlier is just how different every guy is wired. And with that, the other thing is just sort of the day-to-day of being a college athlete. I mean, think about like when you were in college, and I'm talking to you, but also the audience, everyone listening. If you're old enough and you've graduated college, think about like when you were in college, just your day-to-day emotions of how you felt, of like you wake up on a Tuesday morning and you just kind of like don't feel good. And you're just like, I just kind of want to skip class today. I just don't really feel like. These are all true of the guys on the team as well. Like, they have good days, they have bad days. Their girlfriend dumped them. They got a bad grade in class, and the ones that care about that, that weighs on their mind. Like, something's going on with their family. Their uncle got sick, and like that's the first like illness they've had to deal with their family. All this stuff happens, and I think that's the thing that gets overlooked is like you'd be surprised at how many like bad shooting nights can be blamed on some guy's aunt just got diagnosed with cancer and he's like rattled by that because he's like a young guy that's never really had that kind of adversity in his life before. Like that sort of stuff does have an impact. And I think like it's not to say that like pro basketball players aren't human as well. It's just that they're pros. They've done it. They know how to like kind of turn it on and still play and bring the juice every night. And some of these guys, that is one thing I would say that like being in the locker room and witnessing that firsthand of seeing guys who usually have a ton of energy and they come in and they're down and your teammate has to pick you up and all that sort of stuff. Those are the things that I would say that that get lost sometimes with that. And I try my best to be cognizant of that when like I'm criticizing guys, and I try not to grill guys too much for going through shooting slumps and all that kind of stuff. But you know, there's another like the old school way of thinking would be like, I mean, you just kind of have to suck it up and play and deal with it. And I guess there's value in that as well. Of like the best way to overcome adversity is just quote unquote man up. And a lot of people, that's like an outdated way of looking at the world. But maybe that's a valid point. But I don't know. That would be one thing is that.
That's so. No, that's I mean, that's a great point and always useful to remember. I mean, I know for us, like our thing is always, we don't want to say anything on the show that we wouldn't say to somebody's face, you know, because it's a little different if you have to go face people as a media member every day, and it's easy to kind of throw stuff out. But that's an important one to remember too, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying like if a guy's going 0 for 12 in a game, I'm not saying he should be immune to criticism because something might have happened in his life or whatever. Because you know that you should still be able to criticize him. It's just it's just the nuance of it, you know. It's not like just saying this guy's trash isn't necessarily a productive way of
no
of handling that situation. When there might be more to it than that. Is all I'd say. And maybe there's nothing you actually do with that information, but like sometimes it's just nice to know that there's more to it than that. Like maybe like you should still maybe criticize the guy just as you would without the extenuating circumstances, but it's still just like nice to know, oh, okay, so that's why this guy, you know, this guy had the flu for 3 weeks and that's why he sucked for those 3 weeks. That makes sense now. That sort of stuff is that happens a lot more in college basketball than I think the average fan would realize is things can impact a player's headspace and how he plays a lot easier than you would realize.
What kind of stuff can fans do that you think would actually make a difference to a team? Like if a fan like wrote a handwritten note to a coach or to a player, or like, does that stuff matter? Do people read that stuff?
Yeah, I think supporting guys when you're not winning is the big thing. Because I think if you as a fan want the guys to play for something bigger than themselves, I think you have a responsibility, not necessarily to reach out to them personally, but to understand that college sports, part of the deal is that it's not about wins and losses always. And that sounds absurd to say, especially in the modern climate of college sports. But you kind of have to hold yourself accountable as a fan and say, like, if I'm expecting Romeo Langford to care about more than his draft stock in his 1 year at IU, then I need to care about Romeo Langford personally. And instead of saying like, Romeo, give me wins, I need wins as a fan. It has to be a two-way street where it's like, I'm cheering for you, man. Like, what can we do to support you? Like we've lost a lot of games, but I love the way you play. Like, I always support you guys. That's not to say you're not frustrated, whatever, but I think like that's the one thing I would say is like sort of that to me would be holding yourself accountable as a fan is just, if you're going to demand something of a player, and I'm not calling out individual fans, I'm just saying as like a collective fan base, you want this certain thing out of a player. Well, the easiest way to get that is to provide that yourself, where you show the players and the coaches that, yes, you do want to win. Winning is very fun. Winning is very important, especially at a place like Indiana. But you also understand that there's more to it than that, and that you know, guys like Victor Oladipo, who never made it past the Sweet 16 in a lot of ways, is like a bigger hero than if some turd comes into IU and people don't really like him and they go on a run and win the national championship. It's like, I don't know, man. I kind of like Oladipo more.
Yeah.
So like I think like having that attitude and holding yourself accountable that way would be my thing. But yeah, I mean, for sure, like the guys would love to get letters from fans, especially if you have good things to say, and especially if it's not about basketball. That is sort of underrated too. I think like if someone wrote Romeo Langford a letter and just said, like, I love the ambassador that you are in this community and the things that you've done. And I don't know specifics. I don't know if Romeo is whatever. But, like, if Romeo reads a book to a kindergarten class or something, like, writing him a letter and be like, man, that's awesome. That would mean a lot to him. I don't know the kid. I've never met Romeo in my life. I guarantee you, as a human being, he would read that and be like, oh, so I am more than a basketball player to these people. This is cool. That stuff matters for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're past an hour. I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have time for one more question before we hop out? The last question I wanted to ask you is just about your IU memories. Like, what are your favorite IU basketball memories from growing up, and who's your favorite player?
You know what's funny is my parents moved houses. They live on the west side of Indianapolis, and they just downsized way too late. Like my sister's the youngest. She's been out of the house for a while, but they just now decided to downsize recently. And they were cleaning out their house, and they found a thing in my bedroom. That was my box of souvenirs. And in my box of souvenirs was a lot of garbage, just a lot of stuff that they gave it to me. I looked at it. I just started laughing. I threw like most of it out, but I was picking through pieces. I saved 2 tickets that was in this box of souvenirs from my childhood. One ticket was a matinee showing of Space Jam in 1996 for $4.75. I saved the ticket to that. The other ticket that I had saved was when I went to Lexington for the IU Duke game in 2002.
Oh, and man.
I have the ticket. I even threw away, even as I was looking at it, I threw away the Space Jam ticket, but I still have the I could actually go get it probably if you called me out on it. But I have that ticket. That is my number one memory. It is the game I will always talk about as an IU fan. Like, I not only was it like the most improbable win, like that might honestly be, I can't tell if this is shtick or not, that might be the biggest upset in NCAA tournament history. As more time passes, that game becomes more unbelievable to me. It just like everything about it. You look at Duke's roster, like IU did not play well at all. They were like 4 for 23 from the 3-point line or something.
They had like 23 turnovers that game, I think.
Yeah, whatever. Like they couldn't hit three. I don't think they shot 23 threes. This was back in 2002, so they probably weren't jacking it that much. But yeah, they couldn't. They weren't shooting it well. They were turning it over like crazy. Duke had 6 NBA players on the roster. They were defending national champions. They got National Player of the Year, Jay Williams, on the team. It's like I have no idea how they won that game. No idea. It was Jared Jeffries and a bunch of white dudes, and they beat him. So not only was it that, but it was like I was of the right age, man. I was in 8th grade when that happened. And like that's the time. That is the time of like this is the most important thing in the world. I was on spring break, and so like that whole I don't know, man. So that is my number one memory is going to Lexington, driving down there, thinking like I almost don't want to come because we're going to lose by 30 and it's like such a waste of time. And I went with a friend who's a Duke fan. Actually, he's a guy I went to school with, an 8th grade buddy. His parents took us and he was a Duke fan. And I think we were sitting in the Duke section. I was obviously cheering for IU and he was cheering for Duke. And oh my God, that was the most satisfying thing ever. So with that, to answer your other question, AJ Moye is probably my favorite player.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah, AJ Moye is up there. Kirk Hastings up there. AJ Guyton's up there. Yeah, Tom Coverdale. Like pretty much anyone on the O2 team. I found out recently that Fife listens to our pod, and it has me.
Does he?
I have like this "Don't Meet Your Heroes" thing because like I really want to interview him because I could talk to him about the O2 team and I could talk to him about the Duke game itself for like 5 hours probably.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to meet him because like. I'm going to find out he's just like an average dude. He's just like a regular guy. And I don't want him to be a regular guy. I want him to be I want him to be the guy that almost blew the game by fouling Jay Williams at the end of the game. But then we won and saved the day. So, yeah, but I found out he listens to the pod. So I'm sure I'm going to talk to him at some point about that, and I'll have him on the show, and we'll break all that down because that is without a doubt my favorite memory. But there are a lot of them. I do have a lot of memories, but that one is clearly number one.
Are there a lot of coaches and players who listen listen to your show?
Yeah, there actually are. Not to like, it's weird because I never expect any of them to listen. So I'm always shocked. There's not a single one that I'm not shocked by, including like the Ohio State coaches that will sometimes text me something. So I don't know. Some of them, I think a lot of them just pop in and out because I've noticed that like. When I find out guys listen to the show, I'll say something about them on the next episode, and then they never hit me back about what I say about them. So
yeah,
I listen to one episode a month or something. But yeah, there are a lot of guys. That's definitely the weirdest part because I don't want to change like how we talk about them, but at the same time, I do sort of want to lean into guys listening to the show. So it's weird. I don't want to like pull back because I know that Brad Davison listens to our show. We just had him on the show. And then he plays really dirty. And it's like, crap. Like if I didn't know this kid, I'd be grilling him and making jokes about him. But now it's like, man. Yeah. So that kind of sucks sometimes, but it's all right. We're doing the best we can.
Well, the show is great. I've recommended it many times. I continue to recommend everybody listen to One Shining Podcast. And thanks for taking the time. This was great. We always enjoy having you on the show.
I'm always happy to do it. I'm hoping. Actually, in fact, here I need to. I have my assembly call coaster that you sent me from last time.
Nice. Very cool.
I did not stage this. This is here on my desk at all times. I use it for my coaster. But no, I hope the game is good Sunday. I hope both teams put forth a very tournament worthy. I hope like it's a tie in a weird way, but like I hope the NCAA selection committee is watching and they just come away and there's like, damn, those are two tournament teams if I've ever seen. And then Ohio State still wins, but at the same time, everybody is happy and we both make the tournament. So
that would be the dream. That would be the dream. Well, cool, man. Good luck with the show and with everything, and look forward to talking with you again soon.
All right, thanks, man.
Thank you for being here and for listening to this episode of the Assembly Call. We appreciate it. And we really do rely on the support of audience members like you to keep our show going and to keep growing. And so we have set up a page on our website at assemblycall.com/support that lists 5 ways that you can support the Assembly Call. And we encourage you to choose whichever method is the easiest and most convenient for you. One of the methods is donating, and so many of you have donated, and we appreciate it so much. On that page, you can choose a monthly recurring donation or an annual recurring donation or just a one-time donation, whatever works for you. And if you don't want to donate, another way to support the show is you can use our affiliate URLs, iutickets.shop or iustore.shop when you're going to shop for tickets or gear, and we will get paid a small commission when you use those links. But however you support the show, we appreciate it. Thank you.